With the Edmonton Oilers on their longest losing streak of the season, a Stanley Cup Final Rematch against the Matthew Tkachuk-less Florida Panthers, the Winnipeg Jets on another long sustained winning streak ahead of the NHL trade deadline, and Macklin Celebrini with a quiet and measured Calder Trophy campaign on today's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and my co-host, Hunter Hodies, one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we will start today's show, Panthers, Oilers, Stanley Cup Final Rematch. Both teams kind of in a fragile state. We'll move on. We'll talk about the Jets going into the NHL trade deadline, the strong streak there are, and the record Mark Scheifele broke. And we'll tie a bow on today's show talking about the unfortunate reality that Macklin Celebrini is putting together a great season on a really bad team in the Western time zone, so it makes it hard to appreciate. So, Hunter, I don't know if you know this or not, but this is the first time all year the Oilers have lost 4 games in a row. They lost the last game before the Four Nations face-off break. They've lost the 3 subsequent games since then. They have given up at least 4 goals in every game over their last 4 games, and they got their butts thoroughly kicked by Tampa Bay on Tuesday night. That game was not even close. And typically, if a team gets out to a big lead, the back half of the game, the losing team at least makes the underlying numbers look respectable. They pad the stats, they get shots on goal, and it ends up looking a little more even than it was. That wasn't the case on Monday. That was one of the worst, on Tuesday. It was one of the worst games the Oilers have played all year. If I remember correctly, the seventh worst expected goal share, the second worst high danger share, and the third or fourth highest scoring chances against differential of any game all year. And going into a game against a team that the last time you played them, they came into your building and they pulled a game out of their butts in the third period and really kind of left you stunned. The Oilers bounced back and have played reasonably good hockey right now. But with the trade deadline 8 days away, it kind of feels like we're reaching an inflection point in an Oilers season that's largely been pretty good.
Yeah, no, they had a little bit of a slow start, kind of like last year. Not as slow as that, but still a bit of a slow start. They rebounded like everyone suspected, and then now they're going through this losing streak after the Four Nations face-off. But this is something that I think every good team goes through throughout each season. You have a stretch where you're not playing your best hockey. You're trying to dig your way out of it. I expect the Oilers to do this here. I know they're not playing well defensively at all right now. I know the goaltending has also been a bit suspect. So I'm curious to see what Stan Bowman does at next week's trade deadline. Does he go out and get another defenseman to add some more depth to his blue line, maybe get someone to play in the top 4 potentially? Does he go out there and who knows, Nick, does he get a goaltender? I know that's been something pretty loud in Edmonton country right now just because of the way Stuart Skinner has been playing, but I think they also need another forward for this run. I don't think they're getting as much production out of some of their forwards as they would like this season. So in my opinion, I know I'm an outsider. You're the host of Locked On Oilers. I think they could use another forward to really shore up their depth heading into the postseason because I don't want them to be too top heavy. I still think this is, one of the best teams in hockey, but I still want them to be a bit deeper heading in the postseason. But I'm really excited for the Stanley Cup rematch against the Panthers. It sucks that we won't get Matthew Tkachuk there. We don't know how long he's going to be out, but just based on, how he was limping after the Four Nations face-off, based on, what Paul Maurice has been saying, it kind of seems like to me that he might be back closer to game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs at this rate.
I was going to bring this up later, but I think be off the segue there. I talked about it with Armando. We did a crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Panthers for today on Thursday. There's a world where we LTIR Matthew Tkachuk to Erik Karlsson to the Panthers to replace the Brandon Montour spot and really bolster that group. And I think that when I talked with Armando last night for the episode, that's what he said he feels the Panthers need the most. They need a right-handed defenseman. It's simply a matter of, do they want to go for somebody with more of an offensive tilt, or would they look to more of the David Savard, big, experienced kind of guy? And I don't know if I don't think there's a world where they could make Matthew Tkachuk work unless they were, Erik Karlsson work unless they were able to LTIR Matthew Tkachuk. But it's an interesting proposition, as just somebody who likes thinking this out and gaming this out, thinking about what you do in the armchair GM spot. Erik Karlsson on that Panthers team would be something they don't have on that back end.
Oh, 100%. Like they would have someone that can move the puck at will up the ice. That right side, man, him and Ekblad would be nasty. The thing is, do they have the cap space to, fully get him? And what are the Penguins asking for in return? I think that's going to be the big thing. To me, this has always felt like something that would be done over the summer, just because I think the Penguins, in a perfect world, I think they want to get out of that entire contract. I don't think they want to retain. And, I haven't said it on the show yet, but as we get closer to the deadline, I'm going to. If you're going to retain on that contract, which again, I wouldn't, I would want a pretty, at least decent package coming back because you're retaining money. Now, if you're just getting rid of the entire deal, okay, I would take a little bit of lesser value back because you're taking on the whole contract, and we know the Penguins are doing this rebuild on the fly. But I think Paul Maurice would use Karlsson in a way that I think could put the Panthers into the next level, in my opinion. I think Karlsson, the way he played for Team Sweden at the Four Nations faceoff, that was a completely different version of Erik Karlsson that we've seen. He has not played like that with the Penguins. I think part of that is due to the coaching with Mike Sullivan, but with Paul Maurice there, and also you have Gustav Forsling with the Panthers, and I think, by the way, a pairing with Forsling and Karlsson would be nasty together. I mean, with the way Forsling plays in his own zone, the way Karlsson drives offense, would be a perfect partner for Karlsson. Like that, you saw one of the reasons I felt why Karlsson was so successful at the Four Nations faceoff. He had Matthias Ekholm next to him, someone who was a really good stay-at-home defenseman, really physical in his own zone, can clean up some errors in his own zone too. Forsling's kind of the same way, and I think he would be a great fit with Karlsson if Florida decided to go after him during this trade deadline or potentially over the summer. So again, don't think it's going to be at the deadline, but if they were to be interested, I'd be curious to see what they would give up and how he would fit, because I think it would be really fun.
Tying a bow on that, and we can visit the Oilers side of this as well. The problem the Oilers have is they have an LTIR situation of their own, Evander Kane, which may or may not be resolved in the next week and a half. And that kind of inhibits their ability to take on any salary of note. There aren't a lot of goalies out there, which is kind of the issue. Your choices are Karel Vejmelka of the Utah Hockey Club and John Gibson of the Ducks, who is hurt and hasn't really played great hockey in a few years. So on the back end, you have that issue. They also have too many forwards to begin with. If you go down that left side, you're talking about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Podkolzin, Janmark, Jeff Skinner. You have the looming Evander Kane return as well. And it's really a question of what do the Oilers think they need? And, if I were to give you my honest account, I think you're probably more likely to improve this team and you have an easier path to improving this team by adding another defenseman than you are a goalie, just because I think it's so hard to get a goalie situated, especially if it's going to be someone who's going to be, a 1B and you're going to be in a tandem. I think it's going to be really hard if you try and drop someone in a tandem with Stuart Skinner with, 15 regular season games to go. Each guy's going to get, 6 or 7, and whoever's hot will be the goalie going into the playoffs. I just think that's a really difficult proposition to drop anyone into. It's really hard to get into a rhythm as a goalie.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you. I've seen the rumors about John Gibson. But does Edmonton want to take on that contract? Like, I know
the problem. We've
been beating this bush, it feels like, for a long time when it comes to John Gibson. Oh, this is the year he's going to get dealt. Oh, no, it's this year. Oh, no, maybe it's
2-3
next
years
year.
Of this now. Yeah.
But because his contract he had so many years left, on that contract. But now as it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, it becomes more enticing to teams. So this is the reason why I think this is probably the best chance yet that we could see a Gibson trade. So I'm curious to see if Edmonton goes after him, because I've seen what Gibson has been able to do on this really terrible Ducks team. He's having a really nice bounce back year. Can that continue in Edmonton? That's going to be the $1 million question. I think it can because the Oilers are a much better team. They have better players, especially on their back end. But I would be fascinated to see if Bowman would go after him and to maybe think that, okay, this could be our last missing piece. Because, we've seen the Stuart Skinner stuff in the playoffs. He's fine, but is he going to win?
He's also been benched 2 years in a row in the playoffs.
Yeah,
So,
is he going to win you a Stanley Cup, even with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl and company? That's the question that they got to be asking themselves. And I mean, I know how you'd feel. I would rather have John Gibson in that situation. I know Gibson is not nearly as good as he used to be, but he's still having a really good year this year.
Yeah, I'd roll the dice. I mean, look, it's the last, and we'll wrap up on this. This is the last cheap year you have for Connor, Leon, and Bouchard altogether. Yeah. It's the last year of Bouchard's first restricted free agent deal. Leon becomes the highest paid player in the league next year. And then the year after that, Connor will surely be the highest paid player in the league. We are going to take our first break on today's show. When we come back, we're going to talk about the surging Winnipeg Jets and just how good they actually are right after this. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee. But I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't hacking it. That's why I turned to Trade, and let me tell you, the coffee's next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the United States, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match just for you. Trade has a quiz where in under a minute, you can be matched with a roast that was fresh, smells incredible, and tastes even better. The subscription makes it easy, so no more last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever's in the pantry. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries, Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/LockedOnNHL for 40% off your first offer. drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL with Hunter and I and my friend. This is the second year in a row the Jets have put together a really, really good regular season, and it feels unfair to not highlight the success they're having against the backdrop of the relative lack of playoff success, because I'm guilty of it at times. I think sports media at large is guilty of it at times. We don't highlight regular season success as much as we probably should, just because it's hard to do. There's a real argument that it's harder to win, 55 regular season games in the NHL than it is to win 16 playoff games. Maybe 2 teams every year hit that 55, have the chance to push for 60 wins in regulation. It's a really tall order. And this Jets team for the second year in a row is putting something together that's really remarkable. You look at the NHL standings, they're like 10 points clear of the next closest team.
Yeah, no, they've been tremendous this year, and their high-end talent's been amazing. I mean, Kyle Connor having a season for the ages, 31 goals, 73 points in 59 games. He has been fantastic this year. Mark Scheifele, also 30 goals scored. He has 66 points in 59 games. How about Gabe Vilardi, though, man?
Yeah.
Almost 30 goals this year. He's going to hit 40, I think, by the end of the year, by the way he's going. He has been such a great fit. Ehlers, he's still at a point per game, even though he's been banged up a little bit this year. Morrissey continues to be such a great playmaking defenseman. I still think he is such an underrated player in this league. He doesn't get the respect that he deserves. But the biggest thing about this team, they're so deep. They can run 4 lines. They got 3 really good pairings, and they have the best goaltender on the planet right now in Connor Hellebuyck. The biggest question, and I hate bringing it up, Nick, can they get it done in the postseason? Connor Hellebuyck, he was great in the Four Nations faceoff for Team USA. I got to see it in the playoffs, man. I wanted to see 7 games out of Colorado Winnipeg last year. Hellebuyck did not play well in that series. The Avalanche kind of took his lunch money and spent it, to be honest. Like, they were just beating him clean from everywhere in the offensive zone. I need to see it from Hellebuyck this year. But they're going to be favored no matter who they play in the first round. I mean, it's crazy, man. 42-14-3 so far this season, 87 points. They basically have already locked up a playoff spot, and we're not even at March yet. Like, that's how good this Winnipeg team has played. They are 9 points up on the Dallas Stars in their division. Like they literally have such a big cushion for the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They basically already clinched it again, and we're not even in March. So I'm excited, man. I mean, the West, we could see some really fascinating playoff series. I mean, right now, if you were to look at the conference, we would see Winnipeg, Vancouver first round. Sign me up for that, by the way, with all the talent there. And then you'd probably have Vegas versus Colorado in the first round. Like you look at the 2 division winners versus the 2 wildcard teams. Like, and then maybe Edmonton, LA, so on and so forth. The West playoffs are setting up to be a lot of fun, but I think for Winnipeg, they're already as deep as it is, but I'm still fascinated to see if their front office goes out and gets one more forward that can play, middle 6, top 9, wherever, to maybe put them over the top. I think this is the best chance the Jets have had to win the Stanley Cup in, well, at least of my lifetime, in my opinion. I know they were great last year. They've had some really good teams before that. I know, Nick, the 2018 team was also ridiculously good. I know.
Near and dear to my heart. One of my favorite teams.
You love that Winnipeg team. That series against Nashville, man, was absolutely, that was just tremendous. But I think this is the best Winnipeg team of my lifetime, and they have as good of a shot as ever to win it this year.
So there are 2 things I want to highlight off of that. Number one, there's one guy you didn't mention who a few of the analytics guys I read their stuff have really highlighted this year. Dylan Sandberg's been incredible for the Jets this year. If you go under the hood and look at his underlying numbers, he's been tremendous. Yeah. The Jets are 31-5-1 in games he's played. He's been healthy in, and they have a plus 63 goal differential in the games Dylan Sandberg's played this year. The understated defensive defenseman has value in today's game, I promise. It's just that it's harder to appreciate. And then number 2, and we'll tie this very similarly to the way we did for Florida and for the Oilers, the Jets are going to add at the trade deadline. We know this. This is a fact. Last year, they went out. They added Sean Monahan, which worked out very well for them. And they added Tyler Toffoli last year, which worked out very well for them in the short spurts that both guys had with them. The question is, with so much forward talent, where do you try and improve? Or are you going to try and improve on the back end? But the problem is, and I think this is really, one of the weakest classes of guys available at a trade deadline I can think of. Mikko Rantanen would have been the guy, but that trade happened, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. So sitting here now, does adding Brock Nelson as the Jets' second or third line center really change a whole lot? I don't think so, especially with what the Islanders are probably going to ask you for him. There's not an obvious fit here. I know there are some Jets fans who are talking maybe a Jamie Oleksiak, somebody of that ilk, to kind of push Logan Stanley out of their starting lineup. But when you don't have, the obvious slam dunk fit, I almost want to say you don't want to force it. The Jets have a good group and it's built on depth.
I hear you. I still think
they're going to add, but it's a matter of what.
I mean, honestly, if I were them, I think Brock Nelson does make them better, especially in your middle 6 to top 9. He's someone that can put the puck in the net on any given night, and
good in the playoffs too.
You can never have enough scoring in the playoffs, man, especially with how the refs swallow their whistles. They don't call as many power plays. They like to, keep the game at 5-on-5 as much as possible. Adding someone like Brock Nelson, I think, makes all the sense in the world, especially with an Islanders team that is not going anywhere this year. You would have the opportunity to maybe also sign him to an extension after the season. He's a rental. I would definitely go after someone like that if I were Winnipeg. I understand your stance, but I think, again, you can never have enough scoring in the playoffs.
The one last thought I want to get in on the Jets. We have kind of broken sports discourse where it really only matters what you do in the playoffs, but they're putting together a really nice season. I think if you were to ask me to rank the teams in the West and how comfortable I feel with them, I would probably say Vegas is first, and then I would probably say Winnipeg is second. I think what I have seen from the Jets is going to translate a lot better to the postseason than what I've seen from the Oilers. I think the Stars are very hurt, and if Heiskanen is even slightly reduced, I don't think that team has the quality on the back end to be seriously competitive. Colorado is very good up front, top heavy wise, but I get a little weary about their goaltending situation in a postseason series. I think the Jets have a strong chance this year.
Yeah, I think that right now I would say they're the favorite to come out of the Western Conference right now.
You take them over Vegas?
Yes, I would take them over Vegas. I think I would take them over Edmonton right now, especially with the way the Oilers are playing. I picked the Oilers to come out of the West this year. I would want to see that 7-game series between Edmonton and Winnipeg if we get it, man. I would want to see how Leon and how Connor and company go up against Hellebuck and how stingy Winnipeg plays defense. They are so good at limiting those scoring chances, especially the high danger chances. I think that will be an awesome chess match between the two coaches. So I'm hoping we get that. Also want to see Vegas play one of these two teams in the playoffs. I think the West playoffs, man, as I said, we're going to get some really good series this year. But right now, I think Winnipeg is the best team in the conference.
I think the thing about that is, and I'll finish on this thought before we take our second break, that's the ultimate, do you want the star power or do you want the depth? Because consistently in the postseason, we've seen the star power beats the depth until two teams have equal star power. Then the depth usually is what ends up deciding the series. We're going to take our second and final break of today's show. When we come back, we'll talk about Macklin Celebrini and the San Jose Sharks right after this. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on the fun than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whenever I'm watching a game with my friends, we love a squad ride to try and back a team to a late game rally. Or if we just got a feeling about a certain player hitting a big three, I never feel like I missed a chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid out instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL ahead of a Stanley Cup Final Rematch tonight, which it's not on national TV. It got flexed out. ESPN swapped it out for an Ovi game later in the season to try and follow Ovi's pursuit of Wayne Gretzky's goal-scoring record. So you're going to have to get around that, whether you're an ESPN Plus or if you're up in Canada, a Sportsnet Plus user. But with two teams, the Oilers reeling, it's definitely worth the time. But before we get out of here today, it kind of feels like the calder's been wrapped up since about November. I feel like Dustin Wolf is having a great season, but it really almost doesn't matter. Like if I had a vote, I would almost certainly give it to Dustin Wolf based on the impact he's had on the Flames. He's kept the Flames in the playoff race as a rookie goalie, which is nothing short of remarkable.
It's crazy because I don't think anyone even had the Flames remotely in the race.
I had them dead last. I had them
at the very or close to the bottom of the Pacific. I had the Sharks last. I had the Flames 7th. But they are playing really good hockey this year. They're getting contributions from all over the lineup. Dustin Wolf in net has shown that he is the goaltender of the present and the future. It's been awesome seeing them play such good hockey and blowing away a lot of expectations this year, just because I hadn't been that big of a fan of what Craig Conroy had been doing in some trades and such, but I really like how this Flames team has played this year. But it's Celebrini for me, man. Like, he makes that Sharks team watchable. The plays that he makes with a puck on his stick are unfair, I think is the main word for it. And again, I know they stink, but he is such a fun player to watch. And I just hope they get this rebuild right with him, man, because I think he's going to be a special player in this league for a long time. And he's got to get it. I know JD Young of Locked On Sharks is going to agree with that coming up here in our clip that we're going to play for you all. But I would still vote for Celebrini. I would have Dustin Wolf number 2, but I think Celebrini, with the way that he has played this year as a rookie and just making this Sharks team watchable, he gets my vote.
All right, and here's JD. So, with that in mind, and talking about it from the framing of just changing the mindset, and I was going to bring this up before, but we'll talk about it now. As far as last year, when I was really banging the desk for Brock Faber to win Calder over Connor Bedard, the key for Celebrini and the Sharks at large is going to be them finding ways to improve that team. I like the fact that they did go out and spend money on guys like Alex Wenberg and Tyler Toffoli and gave them term where it wasn't kind of like what the Blackhawks did, where they signed a bunch of veterans to 1 and 2 year overpriced deals with the very explicit, we're going to trade you at the deadline and get more assets to keep kicking the can down the road. Because that's the goal. You know, it's a lot easier to tear it down than it is to build it back up. And the Sharks have been building it up very, 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 very slowly. But now it's time to start, turning these prospects into guys. I really like the season that Will Smith is having. I've always been very high on William Eklund, who's having a pretty nice season for them as well. Now it's a matter of, okay, we got 4 or 5 really young guys that we all think are part of our long-term future. How do we start to bring the best out of them while continuing to improve the team? I hate to be this guy, but we're not that far removed from talking about the Ducks like this. I like Zararis, I like Drysdale, I like Troy Terry, I like Mason McTavish, and it's been 3 years now, and the Ducks have yet to make any real progress. And they got a goalie now, and they still haven't made any progress.
Again, man, losing sometimes takes a long time for your organization to get rid of. You're seeing that a lot with some of these teams. The Ducks, the Sabres doing a rebuild from their other rebuild. Again, man, it really takes sometimes quite a while for losing to get that stench out of your organization to start winning again. And I think with the Sharks, they're going to have a really good chance to get the number 1 pick yet again this year, Nick. I mean, they're the worst team in hockey this year. And that means, one of, Martone, Schaefer, Higgins, Michael Misa. And in my opinion, any of those 4 players, I think, could be NHL ready by the start of next season. I think Misa, Schaefer, and Higgins, they're probably the 3 that are maybe a teeny bit closer than Martone, but all 4 are still very solid in this draft. It's not nearly as deep as next year's draft, but whoever they get, because they're going to get one of the top picks in the draft, if not the top pick. We'll have to see how the lottery balls fall. That player is going to be part of their long-term core as well. So you're right. They're continuing to build this up slowly but surely. They're going to have another high pick in this year's draft. I honestly would expect the same in next year's draft too, which is the Gavin McKenna draft. I don't think the Sharks are going to be that good next year, but I also could see them being a bit more aggressive in free agency, helping surround Macklin Celebrini with established NHL talent to maybe start taking a little bit of the next step. I'm not expecting, again, playoffs or anything next year for Celebrini, but at least moving a bit more forward with this rebuild. And then I think even the year after that, that's maybe when you start thinking about, okay, maybe we can start thinking about a playoff berth in the Western Conference, even though this conference is really deep. So I like what they're doing. They're going to get another high pick this year. I think probably next year as well, but it's still going to be a couple of years before they're firmly entrenched in a playoff spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very easy to get stuck in that perpetual we're right there phase,
Right.
Ottawa's been there for 7 years now. Detroit's been there for 5 or 6 years now. Columbus has been there since 2019, where it just feels like you're one move away and you keep making moves and you keep trying to get better. And really quickly, you're spinning your tires, and it's been half a decade since you've been in a playoff spot.
Right.
The Sharks haven't made it to the playoffs since 2019, that last year where Erik Karlsson was kind of the augmenting force on what was a good but not great team, and they missed their window. And when you miss your window, sometimes it's harder to walk away and kind of accept that. But it feels like the Sharks are making steps in the right direction. But that'll do it for today's show. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next Thursday. Before we get out of here, if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. We'll talk to you guys soon. Everyone enjoy the hockey.